Alright everyone, it's time to talk about how YouTube has become openly hostile to basically its entire user base. If you are not a priority creator, so you're not an MSM political content, like a Democratic politician, some Republicans, CNN, Fox News, Breitbart, some of these groups, or a craptivist group like the ADL or something, if you're not on that list and you're not like a mainstream musician or artist or something, you're being screwed by virtue of the fact that those people are being incessantly promoted. Like with this up next bullshit that no longer you can seemingly disable. I watch a music video. Like let's say that I'm in the mood to watch old 80s retro stuff, and there are a whole bunch of channels that specifically do that, or they make new retro wave, sort of paired in. 2 or 3 years ago, you'd go to one of those videos, the related videos by and large were actually related to that content. Now YouTube just looks at you as a homogenized unit and figures, well, this person is into 80s music, conservative politics, libertarianism, cryptocurrency, and anti-war activism, right? Plants, or whatever. Well, they're watching several videos about 80s music videos. They must want to watch political videos now, because we know that they're into certain elements of politics, so we're going to stack the related videos with those. And they almost invariably come from the related videos, search everything, from priority creators. Like, again, the other day I was watching, what was it, I think Crocodile Tears by Karuki or some other, like, 80s retro song, and it did the up next thing. I come back and it's playing some fucking rap song. Well, I might be in the mood for that, but it has nothing to do with the kind of music I was listening to. YouTube's machine learning, obviously still in kindergarten, as far as its common sense levels go. YouTube is even more hostile, though, because of the purges. And this doesn't even, by the way, start with Adpocalypse. A lot of people think, well, in like 2016, you had Adpocalypse and YouTube screwed a bunch of people and it's been downhill since. No, YouTube had actually started doing it before them. There's a link in the description to a video by The Quartering, actually. And this is something that has been replicated. I've seen so many mainline content creators, both small and large, both sophisticated and Luddite-esque like me, who have been complaining about the one same simple thing. Around the beginning of this year, several months ago, roughly coinciding, by the way, with the US election, all of a sudden, magically, virtually all non-MSM political and current events material, and a lot of attendant material, by the way, too, suddenly crashed and burned. All of a sudden, people, across the board, regardless of politics, regardless of what kind of material they do, is it edited or is it more like raw and unscripted? Is it meant to be more informational or more entertaining? Live format, standalone format, a mix of the two. Are they left or right leaning? It didn't matter. People who were gaining hundreds of subscribers a day, thousands of subscribers in some cases, all of a sudden flatline. Like I've been flatlined now for months. My channel is neither growing nor shrinking. It's almost completely dead in the water. Why is this? Because number one, people aren't being notified when I upload. Number two, new people can't find the content, and this is simply because of the algorithmic structure. The problem is that YouTube has a system now where, for instance, let's say there's a news story about a church burning down, and I make a video about that. Years ago, it would generally be highly searchable. I have a large audience. It would get that initial boost in views because it's going out to a large audience, one that generally well likes the content. There's a lot of engagement, and YouTube would say there's a lot of engagement, it's highly ranked, it's 95% likes or whatever, so this content is high on the list. What happened is that years ago, YouTube switched this, so that more often than not, if CNN has covered the same story, even if I covered it earlier, I scooped the news, which has happened, by the way, and with many other people too, their content automatically shoots ahead of yours. If you have any significant event that the average person would be interested in, and you cover it, you're going to get a situation where the entire MSM has done the same. For anyone who predominantly or solely fixates on news or politics topics, therefore, or anything with regards to religious discourse, activism, social systems, sociology, anything with regards to that, anything with regards to certain aspects of education, certainly health news at this point, you're going to get scooped by the MSM regardless of how good your content is, because you don't have priority status. Initially, priority creators were a thing that was related to flagging. When YouTube first unveiled the idea of priority creators, basically what they were saying is, if you're a known brand, a significant long-term user, something like that, you got 1 million subscribers, you're on the list. Not necessarily anymore, but initially you were. You're on the list if you're well known. You're on the list if you're a corporate brand of any renown, Nike or CNN or something. You're on the list if you're a mainline political figure. You're someone who is particularly notable. The problem is before that, and this addressed a real problem, before that on YouTube, mainline channels could get mass flagged with copyright attacks and get taken down. Now, they would always get restored, but if you if you cater to 1 million people a day and you lose an entire week's worth of work, that can be a problem. And it began demoralizing large users. So they implemented a protection for them beyond simply the partners program that gave them a little bit of extra protection, but not quite enough, especially with regards to copyright. The problem is a couple years later, they said, well, the priority system works well, but you know what we're going to do? We're going to start promoting that priority content. So people who really follow the rules, they kiss ass, basically, and have $1 million contract, will automatically see a greater return. It was inevitable that this would happen. And it ties in, by the way, and this is something I mentioned at the time, and people were like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. It ties in with Adpocalypse. Adpocalypse occurred because you had more and more users with audiences large enough to gain ads, but not enough advertisers to serve them out. What happened is that someone like PewDiePie, that has 100 billion trillion views on a video, was seeing a declining rate of return on their investment of time. YouTube had to choose whether to prioritize the 1%ers and the priority creators, or to continue equally prioritizing every person on the platform. The problem is that most people on the platform that have even mediocre audiences and maybe get ad revenue were sucking up the bulk of the ads. Not because of high engagement or because these people are relatively well known, but because there were so many of them. And so YouTube said, well, now you're going to need 1,000 subscribers to take ads and a certain amount of videos, a certain amount of views, and a certain amount of engagement. And they bumped the threshold up, eliminating like the bottom 90% of content creators. While it was draconian, there was nothing else they could do. But now they're trying to do the same with engagement. What have I repeatedly stated? It's not about subscribers. It's also not about views. It's about time usage. The problem is that because the platform is so massive, and because such a large proportion of users create reasonable amounts of content, it's taking attention away from their MSM partners, which are people that in many cases they literally pay for exclusive content. Vox, for example. Vox is a competitor of the kind of content that I do, the kind of content Tim Pool does, the kind of content that Crowder does. Who's going to be preferred by YouTube? If Vox begins complaining, the ad revenue is down, who gets priority? Me, Tim Pool, Crowder, someone who doesn't have a huge contract with YouTube? Or the people that YouTube is explicitly paying for the Netflix-style material? Of course Vox is going to get preferred. So they get priority status, and if Vox and Tim Pool cover the same topic, Tim Pool is inevitably behind Vox. I looked up a few days ago one of my videos. I copied out the title verbatim. It is the exact title of the video, and I put it in search. There were 2 other videos ahead of mine. One was from MSNBC. It wasn't even about the same topic. Somehow YouTube's algorithm looked at the title, looked at the tags, and determined that they were basically the same. But MSNBC is a priority creator, so even a verbatim search for your videos in some cases doesn't necessarily lead a person to that video first. It's completely asinine. It makes absolutely no sense. It's completely pointless. And it's vampirizing. At first they were vampirizing the bottom 90%. Now they're vampirizing the 9% above that. People who have large channels, almost 500,000 fucking subscribers, riding up towards 400 million collective views on YouTube as a platform. But the channel's dead in the water. And at first, like many people, I figured, well, I must be getting boring or something. Then I saw how many other people were having the same problem. I saw that my content hadn't degraded in quality, and I saw it was still skyrocketing on every other platform, other than Twitter, which I don't even really care about anymore. How can you possibly say that it's your fault if you're growing on platforms that are 10 times less searchable, and growing at a fairly steady clip, in fact, the same exact clip you were growing on YouTube at just a few years prior? And in YouTube, which is the most searchable, you're doing nothing. The answer is quite clear. You're not searchable anymore because YouTube's algorithms are being hostile towards your content. Now, of course, if tomorrow they gave me priority status, I'd probably be gaining 1,000 subscribers a day all of a sudden. But do you think that they're going to do that? In the wake of the election and their tampering in the political system and their constant purges and their constant abuse of the 99% of users, I'm sorry, but there's basically no longer any hope. Every other time YouTube did this, after a while they sort of pulled back, because they didn't want to alienate, that bulk of users that does drive a huge amount of engagement. But now they don't care anymore. You see, they're realizing that as they get more exclusivity and more contracts with celebs and MSM sources, that's now probably becoming the bulk of their money. I'm sure that it helps that they're explicitly driving 90% of content to 1% of the content creators on the platform. I'm sure that has something to do with why the revenue's coming from their videos instead of you, instead of me. And of course, if you're not taking AdSense, like I don't, and you're not really on the table at that point. Yeah. It's sad, too, because YouTube could have been so much better. If YouTube had stuck to its initially very liberty-loving guns, they'd be the good guys of big tech. YouTube, Google is a little bit big to be destroyed by other companies or social justice warriors complaining, especially when you get all the exclusivity deals and shit. You don't really need the corporate ad network as much. The ad-driven internet years ago was clearly on its way out. It's still the way a lot of sites do business, but it doesn't even, as a model, long-term, it doesn't even make sense. It really doesn't. To vampirize a fraction of the cost of serving the videos out in engagement, potentially lowering it because you load everything with ads, doesn't even make sense as a fiscal model. That's about all. Peace out.